Welcome, everyone, to another edition of the Gratitude Podcast. I'm excited to be back here. I've been traveling quite a bit in Vietnam, Cambodia, Bali, where I went to a week-long Tantra workshop that's completely changed my life. And I'm getting ready to take another group to Croatia. And it turns out I've got 3 Tantra teachers coming on the trip. And we are honored to have one of them here. Karen Whelan is with us. She's known as the SOULution Therapist. She's from Ireland. She's really good friends with one of my best friends, Sandra Combe. And I met her last year, actually, her and her husband, Jeff, on my Greek trip. And they're coming again. That's the way it works with these events, everyone. Once you come once, you're hooked and you want to keep coming because they get more and more amazing. And we have an amazing guest here. Karen has an incredible history. She's got incredible skills. She's got incredible powers. She's going to share with us a little bit about that. And I'm going to, as I usually do, we're going to delve into how her brain developed, because that other stuff is, it's just information that we've got. I want to really get into how her brain developed, so our audience has some clues on what they can do to develop their brains in whatever journey they're on. I say that I'm on my spiritual journey, which I'm calling laugh, love, and contemplate, because I'm into the gene keys right now. But everyone's on a journey. And if you're not on a journey, get on a journey. And if you want to get on a journey and really accelerate, talk to Karen, because she can help you accelerate that. So Karen, welcome to the Gratitude Podcast. I've talked too long already.
You did. We had a lovely little exchange this morning, your morning. Hello, everyone. Delighted from Ireland to everyone who's get to listen in on this and watch this. I love Robert. I love his work. I've been following his podcast. I've been enjoying all of the glorious souls that you've gotten to interview so far. And like you say, there's something to take away from everything. Something will always fit someone's consciousness. So I'm hopefully I'm here to serve in that way at some level, which I know I will. You
for sure will. And we're going to have some great gelato in Croatia in just about a week or so.
Yay! I love it. I cannot wait. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it's good to be with you.
So Karen, take us back. I know you had a challenging childhood, and whatever you want to share about that, because it's part of your story. And in the bio you sent me, I read it and I had tears in my eyes. But one of the things that Tony Robbins always says that really impacted me is that everything that happened in our life had to happen exactly the way it did in order for us to be the person that we are today. And, you think about it and go, well, some of that stuff kind of really sucks. Yet I would be a totally different person if it didn't happen. And what Tony encourages us to do is, while some of it is hard, is to really thank the people for not excuse them, but thank them for creating the person, the woman that you become. So whatever you'd like to share about that, just so our audience kind of gets to know you a little bit, please share now.
Yeah. I suppose if I start where I'm at today and take you back to where it all began, I was born, I inherited, I'm a Catholic, so that was my inherited culture. I was born into, the Irish church, an Irish family. God was a very big part of our lives back then. But the sense of God back then was dictated to you within the church setting. So it was this punitive man up in the clouds who would punish you if you sinned and if you hurt your neighbor. I could not connect with that version of a God. That did not resonate for me. For me, as a young girl, I had this encountering of being wrapped up in this incredible sense of love all around me. Love in nature, love with animals, and at times being able to see deeply into the hearts of people, the love of people. So that for me was my sense of God. When I was very young, I was also born into sexual abuse and physical violence. My father, his way to cope in the world with his rage and his anger was to put his trauma onto us as a family, my siblings and me. I unfortunately endured sexual abuse as well. And that went on from when I was a baby up until the day I spoke out at the age of 14, which was a massive thing to do here. A lot of the time you don't speak up, you don't speak out, you keep something like that hidden. But the nature of my spirit is I can't keep things inside of me. I can't repress and oppress things. It doesn't work for my energy at all. So I spoke up and I spoke out. The trauma really resulted in, it was what happened to me, but it was more what I did with the story of it. And the story of it became, I'm not good enough. I'm the problem. I'm unlovable. And unfortunately, I truly believed in that, especially when I spoke out and I saw the pain it brought into my mother's life in particular when I had to expose my dad. It crushed my mother, like it crushed her. And I knew it was going to crush her. It's a big thing to share to someone. And it totally devastated her reality and what she thought was her, family, that this was happening under her in her home, that the man that she thought was keeping us safe had actually harmed me. So it was massive. And when you watch that in another person, I unfortunately at 14 did not have the consciousness to say, this is not about you. Don't personalize it. It's got nothing to do with you. But I did personalize it, Robert. And unfortunately, at the age of 15, I had attempted suicide because my skill at self-hating was deeply mastered at this point. I was a master at self-hating. I looked through the world with that filter and that meaning making of there is something wrong with me. So I looked for the evidence of that everywhere. And that resulted in me getting with boys that weren't good for me. But that was more confirmation and more validation that I'm the problem. I leaned to drugs. I became homeless for 2 years on the streets. I turned my back on Karen, but ultimately I turned my back on the sacred, on God. I disconnected. I began to say things like, why have you forsaken me? Why would you do what you did to me? So I believe that life was out to punish me. That was the truth in my way of looking into the world. And it was a long road home. It took for me to jump on a plane at only age 17 with no French skills. And I took a job as an au pair to a French family. And that was my first encountering with the quantum, with the unexplainable. My au pair mother, I crashed my scooter. I broke my fingers and cracked my ribs. And I knew she was a cranial therapist and an osteopath. I did not know what that meant, but I knew it meant something. And I remember coming back with petrol leaking out of the scooter and I'm pushing the scooter back home. And I come into her and I'm in great pain and she lies me down and she puts her hands on me and over me. And straight away, all that pain just left. And my fingers were perfect. My breathing was perfect. The pain was gone. And she stood at me crying, looking at me. And she said to me, I am so sorry, Karen. I am so sorry for what you've experienced. But if you don't learn about forgiveness, you will manifest a lot of illness in your body. That terrified me. Like, firstly, at 17, how did this woman even know something had happened to me? What was she seeing that I thought I hid that well? I had this armor on, a defense against the world. I was like a guard dog. Nobody else was going to get through my woundedness and hurt me anymore. If anyone was going to hurt me, it was going to be Karen. That's how much of a master of self-hate I was. So I contemplated on her words and they haunted me for a long, long time. And I began to sit with myself asking God, how do I forgive? I don't want to forgive. I hate what happened to me. I hate me. I hate this person. And I got it to write a letter and I wrote a letter to my dad. And my words in the letter were, I will never forget. I'm willing to forgive. I don't want this pain in me anymore. I want you to take it back. To you it belongs. And I sent it to him. I was in, we were in St. Lucia Island at the time. And I remember I must have put about 20 stamps on this tiny little letter envelope. But when I sent it, I remember my body feeling lighter. I remember something, a burden, this armoring just lifted off of me. And I knew I did something right because I felt so good in my body about the words I'd put down and the way I chose to do it for myself. And I guess that is key. And that's why I'm speaking to that for a moment. A few weeks later, it was my mother who disclosed that she could hear my father in the other room rummaging through the papers and she could hear him crying. When I heard her say, she could hear him crying, something in me felt the humanity part, the possibility of humanity still available in this man. But I brushed it off and I returned back to Ireland. I was now turning 19. I was 7.5 months pregnant, believing that my son's dad, we were going to go back to France, build a life, have a glorious time. And I came home, and 3 weeks before I had Aaron, 3 weeks before I gave birth, a letter came from his father to say he was sorry, but he couldn't take care of me or the baby. So I was shocked. My belly is big. I have nothing. I've a loan of a Moses basket from my neighbour because I truly thought I was returning to France. So I'm now responsible for myself, and I'm only 19, and I'm now responsible for this baby about to come into my life. So Aaron came, and that activated a love in me that I had no awareness of, that I was capable of loving so profoundly and deeply. And it also activated in me this awareness of, I do not want my child ever to encounter what I've encountered. So that led to me and my dad sitting down together. And, I asked him a very important question, a very brave question. I asked him, why me? I had chosen not to incarcerate my dad. I had reported it to the police. I had spoken with the social workers, but I chose not to incarcerate him because it didn't feel like it was going to resolve anything. It wasn't going to take care of what had happened. So I sat with him and I asked him, and I pressed it on him, why me? And to even ask another person and make them responsible and to be accountable is already an activation of healing. Because whether they want it or not, they have to step into themselves and they have to meet you with the truth. And I do believe in more truth sets us all free. I know this. And my dad shared, and I was devastated by a realization between the two of us when I heard about his trauma, his abuse, his pain. It was undeniable that both me and him only knew one thing. We both only ever knew pain and suffering and the feelings of not good enough and not loved. And I recognized hurt people for truth, that what he did to me wasn't my dad. It was the trauma version of a human being who was broken, who had never been loved, who never encountered love. I knew that program in him created what happened. I knew intergenerationally, here's intergenerational trauma right here at the table. So I chose to do something, Robert, that a lot of people could not comprehend, which is the nature of my spirit. I chose to look beyond the grossness of what had happened to me. I chose to do the redemptive way in this world. I chose in that moment to pull both of us into wholeness through the power of forgiveness. And for me today, I love that my heart had the capacity to do that. Back then, I was judged by everyone around me for not putting him in prison, for forgiving him. Everyone judged that, and that made me turn on Karen more. But today I can say, wow, I came in here. I've had an extreme life experience that created deep, deep, deep dark night of the soul. I mean, really dark night of the soul where you don't want to be who you are. You want out of it. And I continued in action to do God's way, whereas I could have chosen another way. I could have chosen punishment, revenge, to put upon my hurt, my anger, my rage. I could have inflicted that back onto my dad easily. Of course I could have. But I chose to do it the sacred way. And by doing that, it gave permission for me to heal. It gave permission for my father to become a better version of himself that nobody else had allowed him to be in his childhood. He began to recognize, and he said that to me, your forgiveness truly made me realize that I am, capable of better, and I want to be better. So now today, when I look at that, I'm like, you know what? We all fucking need to know the power of that for ourselves in our own life. We need to know what it's like to look through the eyes of the sacred, look into humanity through that sacred lens, that spiritual lens, see the good, the God in everything and in everyone. Because then if the God in me is looking at the God in you, Robert, then we have God to God energy. It took me a long time to get comfortable with even saying God. I was so ashamed of the word God. God is being murdered out there, and how it's been taught. Our teachings even of Jesus have not been taught to us in a beautiful way. The kingdom of God is within. We have access to a sacred vibration within us that takes us out of our lower chakras into the heart consciousness, that allows us to look more into the world, to see the beauty, the goodness, and the truth of everything, which is egocentric to world-centric. So that's what I care about today. I care about stop itifying each other. I don't want to itify another person. And itifying is when we blame and we say, you did this to me, you've punished me. I'm all about, as you just shared at the beginning, which was such an important opening, I care about understanding that everyone is here to teach me something. Life is trying to wake me up. It's not punishing me. It is trying to show me the essence of my spirit. Today I can go, wow, what a fucking spirit I have. Who else can honestly say they forgave the man who abused them and raped them their whole lives up till they were 14, and they chose to genuinely offer the hand of God in grace and compassion? And that's the deep work that I've done. And it's the work I bring into my work with everyone. So my work is around self-love, and not self-love in that, go and have a massage and, go and get a facial. I mean, no, turn towards that person you've been running from your whole life. Look into them deeply, get to know them intimately, and fall in love with what you are, so you can awaken your own sacred heart love energy for the encountering of God, the universe, to arrive into your experience. That's the self-love I'm only interested in, the doorway into that.
You're such a beautiful spirit, Karen, and thank you for sharing. But I really want to go back and say, how in the world, with all that childhood, how did you do that? What happened in your mind? Like, was it channeled to you? Was it innate? Was it you picked up a book? How did you have the skill and how did you do it?
I know. And I love that you would ask me it that way, because a lot of people don't want to know how you did it. A lot of people would rather go to the grossness of what happened and hear about that and be in the sensationalization of that. That's not going to be in service to the consciousness of humanity. How is that going to serve any of us? Yes, I could talk all day about how horrible it was. It was torturous for me as a child growing up. It happened weekly. It didn't just happen every now and then. The sexual abuse happened every week when my mother was gone away for her only time away from her 5 children, which is to go shopping and go in around town. And she'd be gone for about 3 hours. I would go to bed shaken on a Thursday night, knowing, and I could feel the energy of that sexual desire off of him coming for me. Come Thursday, I would feel it in him. And, and I would wake Friday, I would try my best to go and hide out in a friend's house, but he would send my brother up looking for me for me to come down. And he wasn't a man that you totally, went against, because he was also a very physical, corporal punishment type of a father. You were scolded physically if you didn't do what you're told. So it was terrifying, Robert. It was hell. It was hell for me living in this home with my parents and with my family. When he sat across from me, I was now 19, and Aaron, my son, was only a few months old, and the dialogue happened because I said to my parents, you will never be alone with my son. And it was outed, like our community knew about it, my aunts, my uncles. It wasn't hidden. It was very exposed. And I explained, you will never sit with my son. You will never be on your own with my son. I'm willing, to allow you to be around my son, but you will always have to be in company, either with me or with mom or with someone else. And that was no problem. So when I said that, I knew I could say anything then. when I was able to protect the innocence of my own child, which is my, in a symbiotic way. Aaron is an extension of my own innocence. Once I was able to do that with Aaron, I knew I could do it more for Karen. So one day he knocked and there was some food shopping from my mother, and he came into the house, and the why me was pounding into my being. It was too loud. I couldn't avoid not asking, and I just said it to him. Like, why would you do what you did to me? Why me? Why would you hurt me in this way? And when he shared, in truth, when I watched him sharing, and this is not defending him. I really don't want to sound like I'm defending what happened to me. I am not. I've suffered from that. I am not. But when he shared, there was a realness to the pain he had gone through. It was almost like I recognized that pain because I had it in me. I could see the pain in him. I could see when he spoke about his childhood and what he went through and the violence and the abuse and the rape, all of that. It became impossible to be angry. It became impossible to look through the eyes of revenge. It became impossible. It became more obvious to my heart that this person actually needs what I need, which is love and compassion. We both fucking need this. And I knew it was like a veil opened up from me. It was like my soul could see his soul. I can put language on it today, but for the 19-year-old who didn't have all of this, linguistic maturity, I just saw into the heart of my dad, and I saw that he regretted everything and he was hating himself. And I was sick of hating Karen. And I know the pain of when we hate ourselves. So in that moment, I wanted to rescue that in him. And it's the same with my clients today. When I have young teenagers coming into me with suicide energy, it's like this mission in my heart is to take them into them seeing themselves in the way that God intended them. And I started there at 19 with my father. That was the beginning of my therapeutic practice in truth.
Yeah. So if I understand you right, if I heard you right, it was in that moment it came upon you. You asked the question, you got the response, which was varied, but you had this compassion for that and connection to that, where you almost like instantaneously decided to forgive. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. My whole body, anger and hate had left me in that moment. And there was nothing left other than calm and peacefulness and this seeing from a very different lens. Like I had been in hate from the age of 14 all the way through. And in those 5 years, from living on the streets, from taking so much drugs to numb my pain out, from attempted suicide, from being over promiscuous and getting involved with dangerous men and in dangerous situations, I had only looked through that lens of hate for 5 years. It was my au pair mother who was very spiritual in her way of speaking to you. She began to crack my consciousness because, see, my consciousness was very sealed to be a particular way. So the ego in me, the personality energy of me was very armored against life and very defensive. But she had a way of, psychologically making me safe and emotionally making me safe. And because she, awoken in me a sense of safety within my own interiority, when I sat with my dad, I began to kind of almost embody what I had experienced when living in France. I mean, think of that for a moment. To get out of the life that you've lived in, which was drugs, the streets, chaos, to now live in France, you're surrounded by Mont Blanc and the Alps, you're doing skiing, you're hanging out with beautiful friends, your fellow au pairs, you're in the home of this incredible, beautiful, healthy, functioning family. It unshackled me from that other world. And it also gave me an opportunity to encounter myself away from pain and suffering. So I was able to bring that softness with me when I came home. And then when I gave birth to Aaron, that cracked me wide open. And I'm sure all of us as parents know what that's like to see the baby for the first time. It's an incredible love energy. So all of that together, if I look at that as the components maybe that allowed me to move away from rage and anger and hate to see through the lens of love, that's my probably best way to articulate it to you right now.
It's such a beautiful story. It's hard to hear for a lot of people, but as a man, I had no idea how much it seems to have impacted a lot of people. At this workshop I was at, one of the exercises we had was to play the father to a daughter and then a son to a mother in these exercises. And I had 5 exercises where I was the father to one of the women there who took on the role as daughter. And I mean, literally, I held them and rocked them, and they wanted me to play their papa and just tell them how beautiful they are, how loving they are, all the affirmations building up their worthiness. And I mean, literally, I would do this for 15, 20, 30 minutes. And I had 5 of these sessions, and the women just cried the whole time. And I would I think from my hypnotherapy or whatever, the words just flow out. It wasn't even necessarily for me, but it was such an amazing role to play in this Tantra workshop for these women. And when you speak, I get all teary too, and I reflect back to that. I just want to hold you and rock you and comfort you. But I know that you have become that amazing woman, and now you're helping, all sorts of people all over the world with your healing powers, and you have become this what I say almost like ascended to, you just are love.
Yeah. What you shared is so precious as well, Robert. I love what you shared for your listeners there and what you said. Unfortunately, the innocence of us as children, we're filled with wonderment, and we look out at the world through the eyes of sacred love. I mean, of course we do. We're so innocent. And unfortunately, no matter how good our parents are, they're always going to mirror back to us at some level. Maybe they're tired one day or they're irritated and they say, go away. But in that moment, we feel a dismissal. We feel dismissed, or we come running in full of excitement, wanting to share something, and the hand goes up and go, look, I'm busy, tell me later. What a deflation for a child. So none of us escape, the sacred moment of our authentic selves about to emerge, but the exterior makes us shut down, and we close the gateway between the self and the authentic self. And we dumb ourselves down. We shrink our light, if you want to call it that. We begin to learn in our little playground energy with our school friends, the sense of, they might say, you're stupid, you're playing the game wrong. Right there, we begin to learn who I am is not good enough. So in order for attachment, because attachment is more important for us in our human experience, relationship, connection, belonging, I will deny my authentic self, and I will become a version of a self so that you will love on me. What you described is in that beautiful space container, because remember, we were all born into a womb. That's the first space we come into. So that containment energy is so vital for our physiological safety. When you do that for anybody, even in a role play, you are taking them deep into the unconscious energy, and you're giving to that authentic self within them that sense of love, a love that they felt was absent to them. We all know this feeling. It shows up in our intimate relationships then. It's what we call the distorted masculine and feminine energy. If me, because I was wounded by a man, I have distorted masculine and feminine energy in me. My masculine energy had to be very controlling and clean my whole environment and be bossy, and because I did not know how to allow another in to protect me, because I want them protected. We as humanity are very, very precious. We are delicate. We are very sensitive in our ways of being. And unfortunately, we're conditioned to think that the answer is outside of ourselves. Get the car, get the status, have the beautiful relationship, look a particular way. But all of that, what that does is it reaffirms within us that I am a nobody not unless I have all of this. And it's robbing us of knowing what it actually is to be like, to truly turn in and be your own soulmate, to be the mate to your own soul. And I say this to people, because take it from me as a woman, like I'm not a skinny little mini. I grew up with a sister who was blonde and gorgeous. She had a body on her like Jennifer Anderson. And I had 3 brothers who were little feckin' assholes who would say to me, "You're fat." And they would call my sister skinny. And I was never fat because I was an athlete. I was All-Ireland champion at judo when I was only 13. I was a 100-meter sprint finalist here in Ireland because I had such power in my body. But I believed in them. And I looked at myself and told myself that I am fat. What did that do to me? It made me compare against all other women. So there's the distorted feminine energy. I couldn't love my own beauty. I became jealous of other women. I became very comparison to other women. I'd get uncomfortable in my body. I'd wear baggy clothes to hide my body. I would get very uncomfortable with sex. I did not enjoy oral sex because women will have a lot of shame around their yoni. It was hell. It's so hard being ourselves here. It's so fucking hard. It's so hard to try and navigate a world out there that's full of noise and chaos and throwing so much images at us the whole time, bombarding us with what we should be like. And even spirituality now, they've taken something sacred, they have modernized it to make it look like a certain way to be in the world. And then you have poor people at home going, well, I don't fucking look happy on my yoga mat, so I'm not spiritual. Again, more rejection. Spirituality isn't anything out there. Spirituality for me, in my years course with spirituality, for me personally, was about understanding that we're born, our nature, there is a nature to our spirit. And what resonates for you is beautiful and perfect for the nature of your spirit. It won't resonate with me. It's not meant to. We are meant to be these glorious fragmentations of the mystery because we're not meant to know the mystery. So we're meant to celebrate our indifference and love our uniqueness, our quirks, our energies, all of it. But we really don't know how to do that. And it's hard to find the spaces and the places and the people to gift us what you gifted those women in that workshop. That's not always available out there, or it is available out there and they don't really have that heart intention that you have. They like to be in the power position and they like people adoring on them. Again, more toxic energies, but it is the way it is right now for humanity. But we are cleaning ourselves. And I feel if my message can show people that there is another way to choose to be with trauma and pain, that you can embody it and you can turn it into something very beautiful for yourself, to heal yourself, then I would say, go do that for you. Go do that. You deserve that. We deserve that.
What are some of the processes that you use to help people in your healing processes?
I suppose, again, it really, it'll come down to who comes in and what comes in with them in the room. Like my youngest was a 10-year-old little girl, just to put it to you this way, a beautiful little 10-year-old who was self-harming. Imagine that, 10 self-harming. And the reason why she was self-harming is because she truly believed that her friends didn't care about her. She truly believed that she's fat, so why would anyone like her? And because she felt that way, she would isolate herself and she would stay at home and not want to go out. By staying at home and not wanting to go out and play was creating the sense of I don't belong. And once we feel like we don't belong, we're going to suffer even more. So my little way of working with her was, I work with body and emotions. I get her to feel the feeling of hurt. Where on your body are you feeling it? She'll color that in. She'll name the feeling. She'll put a color on it. We'll talk about the thoughts that she's having. It's a creative way with CBT to help a child identify that my sensations, my inner soul landscape is full of wisdom. And there's so much in here because a lot of the time with emotional agitation, we want to run from that. We don't want to sit in the agitation of ourselves. We want to fucking avoid that. So it's very important with young children to allow them to feel the embodiment of that and give them the language with that. So we felt the emotion. She colored it. She wrote down the thoughts. She was able to recognize when those thoughts would come up the most for her. So then we reframe it. I asked her, because it's like being a scientist in the lab under the microscope. You're putting yourself under this microscope and all you're doing is looking at yourself in a very limited, negative way. So I like to bring in the expansion for the 10-year-old. So I was like, okay, when you're standing with your friends, do they smile at you? And she's like, yeah. I said, okay, so what does that tell you? And she was like, that they like me. I said, do they come and knock at the door for you? And she was like, yeah. I said, what does that tell you? That they want to play with me. I said, there you go. So I said, can you start looking at how your friends are in your company and stop looking at you? And she was like, okay. And, she was coming back in and she was like, Karen, I went out to play today and I didn't call myself fat. And I started to feel more comfortable with my friends. I wasn't shy in myself. I was able to laugh more and they laughed more. And Robert, that for me makes me fall in love with this work, with humanity, because we all need that. I wish I had that at a 10-year-old. I wish someone mirrored to me how precious I actually am. And for me, my connection to God is about that. And I'm not talking about God in the sky. Like for me, when I look at nature, when I look at animals, when I look at trees, the spirit in me knows is attuning to the spirit in them. And that helps me look out at the world through the eyes of wonderment. And I love being here. And then I love being in service. So if I have a woman who walks in and she's been like in a very unhealthy relationship, I will go and get her to do mirror work on her yoni. I will get her to practice the art of sacred intimacy with her own body, with sacred touch, gentle massage, connection, because women will hold shame with their yoni. If we don't like it, we won't like it when the man is trying to be intimate with us. We won't like that. It makes us feel uncomfortable in our own body. So I would do work with her there to reclaim her sacred divine energy, and get her to journal and soul reflect and soul write and just start to rekindle that creative power and that beautiful feminine. And then there's the psychotherapeutic work and there's the spiritual, but I always work with the spiritual in the room and the shamanic work. They all come into the room based on what you bring into the room. Is the only way I can tell you, I might say, here's your container for 3 months work with me, but my goodness, no, if something else comes in on that day, we're gone into that place. I'll take you there or you'll take me there. I go where you take me. I just hold the light with you, illuminating what needs to be illuminated. That's really the style of my work.
Well, I am looking forward to, you're going to do at least one session with our group in Croatia that I'm really looking forward to with the womb work. I think you described it for a group, and I can see the one-on-one is really very effective and important. But you're going to do a group session with us, and that's going to be amazing. I know. If someone wanted to reach out to you and to work with you, what's the best way to find you?
My only platform that I engage on, it's funny with all these platforms. I'm always on Instagram. I mean, that's where you will find me, at the .SOULution Therapist and then my website. And I'm always very receptive. So people can absolutely, send a question, whatever they want. I'm there. I'm there for people. Yeah.
Well, Karen, it has been such a pleasure and honor to have you on our podcast. I appreciate all the sharing. I appreciate the love that you bring to the world, the soul that you have developed or unmasked, really, because we're full of wonderment when we first come into life. And I think a couple of episodes ago, I talked about that original child being full of wonderment. And then we get wounded, we have a defense, we go healing. And, some people eventually get to that place where they become that divine child, now again, full of wonderment. But that wonderment and the wisdom only comes because they actually healed that wounded child. And that's the work that you do for people. And I highly recommend that if anyone has any traumas, any issues, anything going on in their life where they want to just become more of their authentic self, become more loving, reach out to Karen at the SOULution Therapist on Instagram or on her website, or reach out to me and I will get you in contact with Karen because she's from Ireland. And I have the great pleasure of getting to spend a week with her and her husband, Jeff, who's also amazing. And we've done a podcast with him previously. And it's just going to be amazing. Thank you so much, Karen. If there's any final messages final words that you would have for our audience, what would it be? I'll give you the final word.
Oh, beautiful. If only you could see yourself in the eyes of the innocence again and in the eyes of love, you would never betray yourself. And your job here on earth is to do one thing, and that is to self-permit. Go do you, go be you unapologetically. You don't need anyone's permission. You've been given permission by the great creator from the moment you showed up. Go be you fully.
Thank you so much, Karen.